Welcome to Talking Tuesday. I am your host, Fancy Quant, and today I'd like to welcome Christina Chi to the channel here. She is very insightful, very well accomplished here. She currently is the founder and CEO of Bento. She also founded Domeyard LP, which was a hedge fund. She's been on the board and been a guest lecturer at MIT, as well as a long list of other accomplishments. But without further ado, let's dive on in. All right, Christina, it's great having you on the channel. Let's just dive on in here, and why don't you explain a little bit about like your background, education. You have a really diverse experience set here. So,
Sure. Thanks for having me, Dimitri. It's really great to be here. My background is totally normal. Just kidding. When I say it, everyone's kind of like, wait, you did? So I ran a high frequency trading firm for almost a decade. Education wise, and kind of how that happened was honestly, it was just out of a string of I guess you could call it a quarter life crisis, but I didn't have a job lined up after graduation. I was that bad. And coming from a school like MIT, you'd expect me to, but I couldn't get I interned, within like a trading firm on a trading team and didn't get an offer and didn't know what to do with myself, when I was coming up to graduation. And of course, all my classmates all had multiple offers. And that was the funny part is that, people being like, hey, I'm debating between Google and Apple and Facebook. Like, where do I go? Right. And I'm like, I just need a job, please, and so didn't really have a lot of luck with getting a job. And so someone mentioned to me, hey, because for one of our internship projects, the final project was that we had to spend the whole summer coming up with a trading strategy, and then of course there was more theoretical stuff, but we had to present it at the end, and then if they liked it, then they would give us a return offer. Obviously the team did not like my strategy whatsoever. I did a quantitative strategy, and it was for a discretionary trading team, and the team was like, nah, there's no place for this kind of stuff here. And so one of my friends was like, hey, why don't you just trade that strategy, and like, look, if it doesn't work, you have closure on it was a very difficult summer for me. And if it does work, then great, right? Like, you've done something interesting, right? And I thought, that's a really good idea. Like, I might as well just start trading it myself and see what happens. And so, and this wasn't high frequency trading at first. Like, it's impossible to get that up and running overnight. True, like HFT. And so back then it was just, I'd say low frequency, mid frequency strategies and just quantitative stuff, based on rules-based strategies, based on like, if this happens, then let's trigger this, right? It's very kind of simple stuff like that. Got an account on Interactive Brokers and started trading. Literally, like that's how it started. Was just doing that. And so this wasn't a hedge fund at first. It was just my own thing. But by the end of the school year, I was like, oh, we had made around 40,000. We started with 1,000.
mhm.
And then, by the end of the year, we were up to 40K. And I was like, oh, I could pay off I was $40,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I could pay off my student loans. And, actually, I don't know if I can make a living, but so long as I can, get rid of my debts and, be able to barely survive off of this, like I was okay with doing that. And so that's kind of how it started. So then, started the fund and ran that for many years. And that was really fun. Many years later, like fast forward 7 or 8 years, we were trading. The most we ever did in a day was like 7.1 billion
Wow.
traded in a day. So we had a lot of our volumes were, I guess, relatively, you could call it, average, I guess, for the high frequency trading for a small HFT firm. Um, and our AUM was also pretty average for an HFT firm. We were always under 100 million, but we turned over our portfolio multiple times and we hit our capacity. So at first it was so hard to fundraise, and nobody wants to be the day one investor. Everybody wants to be your day two investor. So we ended up having a wait list. It was like weird how the problems change over time, and how you go from this kind of nobody in the industry, and over time, like people kind of hear about you, and you go from there. So but yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey. And then, what happened was in 2020, we had our worst year of returns ever, down about 12%. And now I look back, I'm like, that's not a big deal. Like, I see funds that are down 40% and they recover from that.
Yeah.
But, for me, it was like the end of the world because we hold ourselves to pretty high standards. And, I was thinking like, okay, well, is there a way to use our skill set to do something better? And for the world, right? And we had launched our fund kind of around the time when Flash Boys came out, by the way. And so you can probably imagine, like, whenever we go to like even Princeton Quant Trading Conference, I remember one year, students raise their hand, they'd be like, "You're evil! Like everything you're doing, why are you, like you're doing what do they call it? Front running?" Right? That was a term Michael Lewis used. And it definitely like had a And I think, okay, yes, as much as that book kind of, not really ruined my career, but it's kind of like it had an impact I've never seen a book, it like destroy the reputation of an entire industry overnight like that so quickly. And so we had to, basically like try to be honest about it, right? And to be like, hey, like he has a point with all these things, but front running is illegal, and we can't do that kind of stuff. And maybe, yeah, there might be some bad apples in this industry, but there's bad apples in every industry, right? And it doesn't mean that everything is bad about, fundamentally about what we're doing in the high frequency world. We were not blasting holes through tunnels and under rivers. That was, yes, early 2000s. Like that was a thing with certain companies that had the budget. But, as a startup these days, I think the best part is that those fastest routes between like New York and Chicago, let's say, they're owned by vendors today. And so we just pay a vendor, like back then it was like maybe $5,000 a month, and we get the same speeds as everyone else, and so speed wise, it was totally a fair game. And there's all these things that were totally fair, by the way, for this industry, which is great. And I'm a very like social justice warrior kind of person. So whenever we're getting something unfair, I will call people out for it. The only thing unfair with running this business for many years was how we were treated actually by service providers. Sometimes we had lawyers who refused to work with us because they're very judgmental about, oh, okay, these guys look like they're going to fail, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's unfair. I get it, like we're young, but we had the budget, by the way, we had funding by then. We had the money to pay them. It's just, there's, I don't know if it was something about how we looked or how we spoke, or it was just unusual that when they're a hedge fund lawyer, they're used to working with a certain type of clientele from a certain group of people, right? And maybe we just didn't fit that bucket for them, and that was okay. Like we get over that. But I was just to say that compared to that, like everything else was totally fair for us in terms of getting access to the markets and data, and getting access to those high speeds that we really wanted. Those are all incredible. And so yeah, anyway, but then what happened was that we still wanted to use that skill set and try to, just help the rest of the industry in some way, because ultimately still the business model, we still weren't curing cancer. And I still don't do that today, by the way. I mean, I don't have the skills to do that, but, I'll just tell you a funny story. Was like, we would pitch, how we raised funding initially was like, I would go to these pitch events all across campus after I graduated, but also like all across Boston. Just sign up to this. I remember there's a Microsoft pitch contest, and every startup had 1 minute to pitch, and there were like 30 startups. And the startup going before us was, I remember they were knitting like mermaid tails for humans. And then there was us. We were like high frequency trading firm. And then after us, there was a company that was actually trying to cure cancer. And I was like, holy crap, startups do everything, right? Like the diversity of products that we've been, pitching against. And how do you judge that, by the way? We've never won a contest, and that's fair. We don't deserve to win compared to this cancer curing company, right? And that's totally fine, but it's just for us a way to get more exposure and to get some practice in, which is great. But just thinking like in hindsight, like, wow, how do you even like compare 30 different startups that are doing wildly different things against each other, is kind of just a really funny thing we were dealing with back then. But yeah, so anyway, I guess long story short was, yeah, we started a data company, and now so I run Bento, which is a market data firm. We provide market data. People think that's a step backwards, and yeah, I get it. Like it is in a sense like unusual to take that kind of step when most people want to move from, it's kind of like you move from sell side to buy side in finance. It's a common career path. This is like me moving from buy side past sell side all the way down to service provider, which is like, what? We sell to like, sell side and buy side firms. And we're in the business of market data. So, but at the same time, it's like, there's definitely pros and cons, and it's definitely been a, fun career path for me. Very interesting and weird, I guess, unusual thus far. So yeah.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. I've always started on the sell side, and everybody's like pushing, like, go to the buy side. It's more exciting. And I'm like, I don't know. And then I eventually went into fintech, which everyone thinks is like a step forward, but now I'm working a lot with data.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing. And everyone's like, why would you do that? That seems like you're just like digressing. I'm like, oh, it's really interesting. There's all these quality issues and metrics and tracking. And I get I guess it's like the reputation in finance. Like it's the cool kids are doing this path, but then it's like you find there are other paths that are more interesting, but not necessarily the popular path.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely there was pros and cons though, for sure. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that there's some of the bigger disadvantages of moving from high frequency trading over to becoming a data vendor. I think the biggest disadvantage is just in terms of talent, actually. You could possibly imagine when I worked for the HFT firm, right, we had I forgot one year I think we had like 50,000 resumes a year, just people applying to the company and everyone and their mom wants to work. I don't know, it still became a cool thing over time. I guess they want to work we were a hedge fund structure as well. So, it was like we were double cool and people wanted to work within this kind of environment. And we rarely got questions, during the interview, like, why would you want to do this? Right. Whereas when I work for a data company now, it's kind of the opposite. We get, who wants to work for a data vendor? Not a lot of people. And so we don't get the amount of applications, but also we don't, during the interview, we definitely get questioned a lot more like, oh, like, why, what's the career path for like a data company? I totally get it. Like, there's no, like, there's nothing online that tells you what the career path would look like for a company like ours. And so there's a lot more, I guess, kind of explaining to do and a lot more convincing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, I guess on the bright side is that, we get to like, it does make me happy. Like, hey, we can help startups launch faster. We can help, researchers get their research done without paying a fortune and help other companies that are also large. We have I think we have currently about 80% institutional users actually. So we
Wow.
do help a lot of institutions as well. And then, by the way, we started out targeting startups, but then we found that, institutions actually want this product too. And they ended up kind of being the ones that sign on and drive most of our revenue for the product. But yeah, like that's kind of where we're at right now, and definitely have been kind of grateful to be able to experience both sides of the equation, I guess, and become a service provider today. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you guys like what do you guys do differently on the data side? So one thing that many subscribers are always shocked when I tell them is like data makes or breaks you. And they
Yeah.
think like you can go online and get free data. And I'm just like, I work on the sell side, so I'm not doing like market data and all that. But we
Yeah.
have data sets. It's like I need, a few $100,000 to pick up this small data set.
Hmm.
And like people that are starting firms are like shocked. They're thinking like somehow they can go online and just like
Yeah.
mine this stuff for free.
Yeah, it's like if you build a house on a poor foundation, right? That's like what the data is. And so for our company, by the way, when we were doing HFT, definitely, I mean, data was make or break you. Even just a little bit of 1% better in quality could bring us way more returns. And so everything really, really mattered. We were spending half our time just cleaning up data, figuring out data vendors to go work for, to go look at and test their data out. So I mean, at some point we were interacting with like 24 different data vendors, and it was like a constant process for us at an HFT firm. But even for if you're non high frequency, if you're long only or some other kind of shop, still it's like the quality of the data, is super important. I've talked to folks from those kinds of firms where they've encountered issues like, oh wait, this does matter, and just any kind of basic error could affect their outcomes as well. And so yeah, it's just mainly like making sure that you have a solid foundation. And the ways that we would differ is just one is that we do get our data directly from the source, and we do clean it up. And so far, at least we've noticed, our users have been very, very happy with the quality and everything too. But then on top of that, it's like all of our data is sold on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the pricing starts at 40, 42, or 45 cents per gigabyte, basically. So based
Okay.
on usage, kind of similar to AWS. It's like if you don't use us in a month, you don't pay us anything. And this same goes for live data, by the way. We have for real-time data. And if you don't use this in a month, you still have to pay the exchanges. The exchange has a fee that they do for all their subscribers. You have to pay whatever exchange you're subscribed to, but you don't pay data bento. We don't make any money off of this if you don't use any data. And so it's purely just based on usage, which is the first of its kind in this industry. And we started it because we had dealt with so many, dozens of data vendors, and it was just way too costly for us to, be able to scale. And we realized, hey, if we want to scale better, let's, create a solution for everyone to be able to scale up and down easily with. So yeah.
Yeah, we absolutely love it. We're at a fintech, but we're on the sell side on loans, and we use AWS. And my boss is like, I just love it. He goes, everybody wants to like sell you like that big package, and he's like, we just like to have the service where it's like you pay as you go, and
Mhm.
it makes sense for us because in some months we're very slow, so it's like the
Yeah.
cost is low, and we love that. And then when the busy season comes in, and it's like we have a ton of loans coming through the door, we have the revenue to match the cost, so it's not like this flat fixed cost structure that's really
Yeah.
kind of bouncing around our profitability.
Exactly. Yeah, it's actually nice that way, especially when, you don't know what your usage is going to be and it's seasonal sometimes. And yeah, I totally agree. That's why AWS is as big as it is now, the actually funny thing is I think when we first started the fund, AWS they weren't quite as, they're not nearly as big as they are now, but back it's like a long time ago, it was like, was it IBM? It was like some other company, I think it was IBM that dominated this cloud space actually, but it was just really expensive. Like you had to buy it in bulk. And AWS came out and they're like, let's do this on this a la carte pay as you go basis. And it just, clearly they're now the winner in this space, which is incredible. So, yeah, just interesting to see how that model has become a lot more popular, in this past decade. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So did
Mhm.
you always want to go into finance, or was it more or less like I mean, how did you decide to get like the business degree
Yeah.
and you decided to go down the finance path, and how did you kind of end up going this direction?
So, I feel like in college you meet two types of people. There's like the type of friend who they've wanted to be in finance since they were 2 years old and they started trading when they were 10. And, they're like really excited and interested about this industry. And, they visit Wall Street and it's like exciting for them. And then there's people like me where I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I switched majors like 3 or 4 times and took a bunch of classes and, mainly based on what I was a elimination process because I would fail some classes and then the professor would be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't, major in this. And so I've had that conversation a few times. My big one was I wanted to do biology because this is the thing is, when you're a kid in high school, right? Like I got a 5 in like AP biology, which is a great score, right? I got a really high score in an AP class, which I thought was college level. Then I go to MIT and I take their intro to biology class. Keep in mind, this is an intro bio class meant for people with zero knowledge of bio. And I got like a C or a C minus. I got a pretty bad grade. And I was like, wow, this is MIT. But also the professor was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't major in bio. And I was like, oh, okay. And then my whole identity like changed, on what I was good at, what I was bad at, just everything completely shifted. So yeah, to be honest, I declared finance at the last second, mainly because it was known as the easiest major at MIT. Like, I know it's a horrible reason in hindsight, but thankfully I got really lucky. I was like, okay, there's a lot of jobs in this industry. Thank goodness. And every summer I could get an internship within some kind of financial institution. So I did 3 different internships for 3 different summers. And got exposure to all kinds of different parts of the I guess financial stack, which is great as well, different types of jobs and different teams and cultures and cities as well. But that was how I got into it, was just kind of fell into it during college. And thankfully got lucky in terms of, okay, this is actually a pretty cool path to take. And thankfully didn't make that big of a misstep. So yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you end up in Utah? Because I know you worked for Zions, I saw. So I'm on the
Yeah.
sales side. So when I see like Zions and regions and other like smaller banks, I'm like, oh, like that's like kind of the area I've been working in for a long time.
Yeah, so I got into like well, first off, I'm from Utah originally, so this is my hometown. I grew up here, went to elementary, middle, high school here in Utah. So yeah, it's more that my family wound up here in the early 90s and they went to school here in Utah. So, we just all kind of ended up and settled here, which is very unusual given a variety of different factors. Like I'm Asian, like very rare. So my nickname was Asian in high school, I guess. If people always wonder, like, it's like, yeah, I was one of the few Asians, so that's why. But yeah, so just ended up there, and then now I'm back in Utah again. Lived in Boston for 12 years, but decided, hey, why not come back and be closer to family and yeah, so it's great. I mean, would I recommend it? I don't know. It's not like the coolest place for everybody, I guess, but if you like the outdoors and stuff like that, it's worth taking a visit and just saying hi. So yeah.
I miss the West Coast. So I grew up in Washington State. My grandma actually lived in Bountiful, right outside of Salt Lake.
Yep.
I spent like
Mhm.
all the summers in Salt Lake area. And it's like for me, it's like being in Washington, being in Utah. I love like the outdoors and the mountains and the skiing and hiking. And then I ended up down in Texas, and now it's just like flat and it's nothing exciting to do outside, really.
But yeah, Dallas is a really great place. That was one of the places I had considered actually moving to over the pandemic. But then just visiting all the cities and seeing, okay, they're all growing so fast, and the real estate gets taken up pretty quickly, and the prices have gone up so substantially. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll just stay out here in Utah. And it's like the real estate was cheaper about a year and a half ago here. You get a 6-bedroom house and live pretty well, and I was like, okay, like I don't need that, but at least there's better options out here.
Yeah. So did you move back to Utah when you started up Data Bento, or is it just kind of like a partway through?
Yeah, we had just started Data Bento, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, you know what, like, why all the good things about Boston disappeared overnight, right? Like the city shut
Mhm.
down, and I like to go out with friends or go to good restaurants, and like nothing was available for at least a few months, right? And so at the time, I was just like, planning to go back to Utah anyway, so just for a trip, but then I was like, I'll just stay here, and just not return, just because here it's like, yeah, it's close to the mountains. I during the pandemic, my family and we would hike a different trail every weekend. So it was like just very easy access to the mountains, which was super nice. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting, I guess, call.
Yeah. So with that, do you want to talk a little bit about work-life balance here? I know I've been following you on LinkedIn and you've been mentioning your whole resume is super impressive. The amount of boards you've been on, the positions you've had, and then now it's like you're kind of announcing like you're stepping back from a lot of these board positions and starting to focus more towards a work-life balance and kind of evening things out.
Yeah, I think for me it's like realizing like, that like for especially running a company, by the way, and this is something that when you're a first time founder, especially, you face this pressure of like, I could always do more work. I could, I could never sleep and literally spend tonight doing more sales, right? There's always like something you could be doing. But it's so important to be able to establish boundaries and be like, hey, I need to sleep. My health is really important to me, right? And I need to go to sleep. And this task can wait. I can wait till tomorrow to do this or next
Mhm.
week or whatever it is, right? And I know that's really difficult for people to do because it's like you always want to be picking up things, picking up the phone and doing stuff and calling and sales and talking to your team, whatever it is. But for me, yeah, that was one thing to learn is just that can wait. What can't wait are, your friends' weddings, your friends' graduations, weddings, birthday parties, right? Just things that are really special events in people's lives that, only come once in a blue moon. And, I had, when in my 20s, one of my big regrets was that I missed a lot of those weddings. I missed a lot of those events for work. And then I look back and I'm like, I don't remember what I did for work that day. I don't think it made an impact down the road. Like, I don't think it, didn't matter. Right. But what did matter was that I missed my good friend's really big day. And just realizing like, hey, that only came once, in a lifetime for like a wedding or something like that too. And so yeah, just realizing like what was important and being able to prioritize that. So in my 30s, I'm like, okay, you know what, now it's like that task can wait. I can go, I'm gonna fly out to go, see the wedding or, just kind of, celebrate those big events in people's lives around me and in my own life too. It's like, come on, I like rarely, I'm one of those people who like grew used to like not celebrating my own birthday. And this year I'm like, I'm going to celebrate my birthday. I don't care if I'm turning 32. I don't care if I'm mid 30s, whatever it is, right? Like I'm going to go celebrate it and act like I'm 21, because I never celebrated my 21st birthday either.
Yeah.
And so just like, just realizing like, hey, these, life is worth celebrating. It's okay to pause and take a step back. And part of it, by the way, the reason why I had that mentality in my 20s was because I think part of it was MIT, to be honest. Like at MIT, your friends are always doing something. Like it just,
Mhm.
everyone is so accomplished and, working so hard towards something. There's a lot of almost like mad scientists, like just really dedicating every moment of their life towards something. And, so I felt that pressure as well, but then realized, hey, like life, when I'm 90 years old on my deathbed, I'm going to look back on my life. I'm not going to remember the night I spent an all-nighter working. Like, I'm going to remember that wedding I went to, or the time when my friends wanted to hang out or something, right? And the road trip we did, right? Those types of things I think are going to be things I remember as the highlights of my life, and not about like, oh, I made this extra dollar by working overnight. Like that's not going to be in the grander scheme of things. Like I really don't care, and I'm not a high maintenance person, and so it's like, I already have enough money wise. Like I don't need to, and I know that's like, oh, my investors are probably like rolling in their graves, like, oh, you don't want to, you need to work your butt off, right? And do the thing. And it's like, it's okay. Like it'll still, things will come together, and it's good that we don't burn out. It's good that, there's work-life balance. And so, yeah, recently as well with the board seats, yeah, I sat on like a bajillion, nonprofit boards and things like that. And, my whole thing was like, I do love giving back, and I still do, but it's just, thinking about like, okay, I do appreciate, I want to have my weekends back now. And, I want to reclaim that time and be able to spend it with my family and people I'm the closest with. And, so 2 years ago, my family had a very personal tragedy. So my brother passed away. I have two brothers. So one of my brothers passed away. And so that was also an event where I'm like, you know what, like, why didn't I spend more time with him? Like, why didn't I, just, there's so many questions. Like I could have, spent more time with him. I could have come home more often. I'm, in Boston, but, he was here still. He's like 10 years younger than me. So, he's still growing up in Utah and going to school, but I'm like, why, we didn't have that much of a childhood together, given how far apart we were, both physically and, in terms of age. But I think those things help you realize like, hey, like life passes you by if you, don't stop and, appreciate what's around you, right? And spend time with people around you. So events like that, definitely help me realize and put things into perspective a little bit better. Just as a human being, despite like, okay, I could be more successful. I could sit on all these boards and, successful on paper or whatever, like it looks cool. Yes. But you know what, like I'd rather just spend that weekend with my family. I'd rather just, personally, that was the right step for me. But also like I want to hand off the baton to, the next person who, I don't want to hoard things like that either, right? And if my mind isn't in the right spot, then I want someone else who's more qualified to, be able to take on, let's say a board position or a leadership position, within these organizations. I think is also a really good thing. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to hand off the baton.
I can imagine. For me, it was, so I'm probably around your age. I'm earlier 30s.
Yeah.
For me, it was the same thing of like, you look on LinkedIn and I see the people and it's like the industry and it's like everybody has a new accomplishment coming out. This
Yeah.
person has a new, position at some fancy firm and they're making more money. And then I had a daughter in, oh man, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was kind of like that moment where it was like I looked at it and I was like, I could work, overnight. I could work 12, 14 hours and I could really get a lot done at work and feel great about it. But at the end of the day, it's like I'm missing out on all those opportunities for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like seeing that it's like she's growing up and all of a sudden it's like she's
Yeah.
a baby and then also like she's walking and then I'm like, I'm still at the office,
Yeah.
staying late. So for me, I think that was kind of the same instance where it's like, I feel like it takes an event. Like you need some sort of
Yeah.
life trigger to realize like, yes, it's important to make money and have a career and do that.
Yeah.
But there's this entire life that's outside of your work, your family, your friends, other things that are meaningful and
Yeah.
more valuable in the long run than just, an extra job or an extra project or
Yeah. So true. It's like your baby will only be a baby once, and that passes by, you blink an eye and now they're walking, and then you blink an eye, now they're running, and it's like that just happens so incredibly quickly. And so it's like just so important to, just spend real time, with them and during those very important years. And so I totally agree on that. There's actually, speaking of that, there was an article in the Harvard Crimson. This was a long time ago. I don't think it exists anymore because I keep pointing to it and people like try to look for it and they can't find it. But I'll just explain what it was, which is, there's a student who had graduated from Harvard, probably about maybe 20 years ago now. It was a long time ago. And when they graduated, since their graduation, they wrote about how, they have friends who won a Nobel Prize. They have some friends on Forbes 30 under 30 and whatever other trophies, were a big deal at the time. And friends who are CEOs, there's some friends who have married a supermodel and they have a picture perfect family. And, it's like every time these things happen, it's like the person who's writing it said that, the author felt a sense of not really disgust, but like a sense of jealousy, and it made them feel inadequate and inferior, when they heard about their friends' company IPOing or someone winning a Nobel Prize, right? I get it, right? And so they kind of wrote about that feeling, and how they realized over time that it's not that they don't want their friends to succeed, it's that they were not in a good place in their own life, that their own career wasn't going the way that they wanted to, and so they kind of changed the way that they were approaching their career, and changed their job, like changed their career path, and finally found a path that they were really enjoying. And then they realized, hey, like I'm now they can like fully appreciate where they are in life. They can appreciate where everyone else is in life, and be proud of your friends and be grateful for your classmates for doing these huge accomplishments, right? and that
Yeah.
you don't need to win a Nobel Prize. You don't need to have all these like shiny trophies, and you can still be happy, in your own life and in your own career. And I think that's so important, for people to realize that you don't need to, have all these like shiny trophies to feel like you're worth it, or to feel, like you're doing enough, right? And I wish I had noticed and realized that earlier in my own career, especially when I coming from such a competitive college, and everybody's going off to do their own startups and IPOing and whatever else, and just to realize like, hey, we're all human here, and the one thing that makes you happy is unique to you, right? And that could be a career path that no one else has ever even considered, and that's okay. So long as you're happy in your own life, like I think that's what matters the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. So what do you, from a founder's position here, what do you think is the hardest thing for starting a fund?
Mm.
Because I think a lot of people think it's like this nice, easy path. So I work in quant finance, and everybody has this little easy idea that like if I can come up with a model and it will make money, that's all I need. And I
Mhm.
try to explain to a lot of these students, there's like running a fund is a completely different skill set than building a model.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
stressful being at startup. So what was like the challenging pieces for you? Things
Yeah.
that you were grateful for as well that kind of helped the
Yeah.
process?
So I think the thing is that when you think about running a fund, is everyone focuses on like running the models themselves and strategies and getting something up and running. But what you don't think about, and what's frustrating for us and for a lot of other firms, is the everything else, the operations behind the scenes, the accounting, the finances, compliance, the investor relations, the fundraising. Like there's all these different things behind the scenes that, for better or worse, you kind of have to do. And then that kind of stuff I think people overlook, and there's not a lot of resources online about how to go about doing these types of things. Like, what does it mean to find the right lawyers, and what kind of fund setup, what fund structure do you want to have legally, right? And it's like, oh, there's resources on everything, but what's like the right thing to do? Do you want to start an LLP or an LC or an LP or C corp or S corp, like legally? And then also, is it a master feeder structure? Is it going to be, there's a bajillion other fund structures you can have, and that kind of stuff, like people don't think about. And you just think about, if I have a good strategy, then I'll just run it. And it's like, I wish it was that simple. But if you want to accept like other people's money as a hedge fund, then you need to set up things legally. You need to find the right service providers and lawyers, and even like have the budget to pay these lawyers. And back then, it was like 10 years ago, the cost of getting the fund up and running, I think, cost well over 100,000 at some point in time, just in legal fees alone. Today, I'm sure it's probably going to be like 500,000 in legal fees, just to get your hedge fund legally up and running. And so many things to consider that we just, don't really think about. And I think that was the hard part, was kind of learning what we didn't know, and knowing, kind of like, oh, this surprise came up. Oh, we need this too. We need to find, an accountant. We need to find an administrator, an auditor. And then every year going through the audit process as well. Like, it's a lot of work, and it's like enough work for a full-time job, but I was doing that stuff. And I guess what am I grateful for? Maybe grateful to have learned like a bajillion skills. And, now I know all about the legality of a fund. And I know about, how the audit process works, and, what kind of, how we do our finances properly, and things like that. I learned how to fundraise, and all the fund operations and back end part of things. Like, I've had to learn the back office functionality as well. So I guess grateful for all those things, that it's taught me kind of more holistically, like how a company is run, and that it's a lot, it taught me to appreciate as well, I guess, middle and back office functions. Because at first, you're like, I just want to work for the front office. It's the coolest and sexiest part of the business, which is true. Yes. It is. But also, realizing, hey, I have deep, immense appreciation for people who do choose to work in the middle and back office, because it is a lot of work to, behind the scenes, to help make the fund run on its wheels properly, and to support the front office in terms of letting their strategies run seamlessly as well. And the technology too, I forgot to mention, just like building, back then we built our own order management system, we had our own feed handlers, and we had co-located servers. We were connecting to these exchanges by co-location. It's just a lot of work, hardware and software wise too, to make it come together. So yeah, I would say just the complexity we had like grossly underestimated. That was our biggest challenge.
I could see that. I mean, even for me, I come from the big bank, so it was really nice building models like relating into your data side. Like data would just come in, and we would like filter data. It was like a few things, like we'd check missing, or we would make some sort of adjustment, and then we just built models. And then as I became up through more senior positions to run like a validation team for model risk management, it was like all of a sudden the data quality team at this smaller bank wasn't actually managing the quality. And so
Hmm.
now we're seeing all these issues coming up. And I'm like, let me meet with the data team. And then I like realized like I don't know, I never clicked. There's this whole team of data people that are doing data quality and data processing and data engineering and pipelining all this data. And in my head, it's like, you sign a contract and like the data just comes into this nice, pretty table. And people just, being a model developer, we just make models out of it. Uh,
Yep.
but yeah, I think, and then as now I'm working at kind of a fintech as well, you're seeing more of like the accounting side and the issues with that. And you see more of the strategy. We have
Yep.
someone that just goes out and just works with investors and it like blows my mind. I'm like, but why do we need this? And then all of a sudden it's like, we need funding. And I'm like, oh crap, we need cash coming in the door. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
really grateful that person has all these connections and understands the financing piece of it so they can find, investors and securitizations and all that type of.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was similarly, we've had many of my friends, who've started funds, and for them, a lot of them, most of them come from like the quant trading industry, so they've worked at some very, very reputable firms, and they're, in my head, they're geniuses. They're just really incredible at what they do, but definitely still face that challenge of business wise. Like that's the area where they falter, by the way, usually is like when it comes to the business stuff, getting things together, even hiring people. It's like you got to convince people to want to work with you. Even that is very, very difficult to do for many people out there. So just thinking about all these different factors and how a business is run, it's like tough to have to think about all those different components for sure. And that's why, like, whenever people want to start a fund, I always, I try to be like, I always support them, of course, in whatever people want to do, but always ask them like, hey, is there a reason why you want to accept external investors, or with all the baggage that it comes with, right? Or you can trade your own capital, and it actually does save. It's still a lot of work, but it saves significant amount of like the legal headaches and stuff like that. You don't have to deal with nearly as much if you just do your own thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you see issues though with scalability on funds? So I think
Hmm.
a lot of people realize, I don't know why this isn't taught in finance. I have a finance undergrad as well. And I don't
Hmm.
understand why they never taught, at least in our area, about like a strategy only works for so much depth. Like you can only put so much capital on one idea.
Hmm.
But then at the same time, it's hard to make money when you have a really small amount of capital. So it's like
Yeah.
trying to find that optimal size where it's like you don't want to be the biggest, fund in the room because now you have all this extra cash you don't know what to do with. But if
Yeah.
you're too small too, it's challenging to find, I guess, enough capital to make it worthwhile for your salary and your employee salaries.
Yeah, exactly. I think for high frequency trading, it was even bigger of an issue just because we were turning over our portfolio so many times during the day. So for HFT, it's like the AUM itself isn't as important as just the volume that you're trading, because we could take a tiny amount of AUM and trade, make 25,000 trades off of it during a day, and that's actually, that's pretty. At least for us, it was pretty normal to do so. But yeah, I think the challenge was still like scalability wise. Okay, on a business level, there were investors who suddenly wanted to put in more money, or other new investors coming in, and they wanted to, and it's kind of like, well, if we accepted this capital, then our returns are going to go down percentage wise, because like there's only so much we can do during the day, and we were already trading, probably the most was around maybe 5% of ADV, average daily volume, of these different, some certain exchanges that we were trading in. And that was quite a lot already. That's already like hitting the space of like too much. And there was only so much more alpha, so many people you can trade against. And, and so just, we were hitting capacity for reasons like that. So our returns would go down if we, accepted more capital. So definitely there was a capacity related issue there. And then had to try to, go from there and figure out, okay, do we want to be a bigger fund? So we've definitely had questions about like, do we want to take the Two Sigma route, of starting like what they kind of just decided to do everything. Now they have Two Sigma Ventures, and they do they probably have a long only side of things. They have global macro, and things that are not HFT, like kind of what they're kind of known for. And so they could expand out of HFT and do all kinds of different things. And I think that's awesome. They've grown immensely over the past decade as a result of going out there and taking that path. But we were kind of like, we, unfortunately for us, like we didn't build our technology to be able to expand like that as easily. And we didn't have the capital, and the operating capital to be able to, take those ventures and to go out there and, do all these different things at the same time. And all of our skill sets were in high frequency trading. We're very limited in terms of kind of what we were able to, do. And so So for us, it didn't make as much sense to do that. But definitely, those are questions you can think about, like, okay, how can I scale over time? And for HFT, does it really make sense to be a hedge fund? Actually, no. But then again, it's like I get it. Some people like us, we didn't have the money to even trade a couple $1 million at the time. So it just didn't make sense for us at that time to, start our own HFT firm, make it a prop shop. But then, now that it's like, okay, over time now we do, and it's like, okay, now we can, convert it into a prop shop or do whatever we want. But back then it was definitely like, it's just thinking about the business situation that we had at the time and, what we needed to do. So, yeah, I guess there's just a lot to consider. It's complicated. There's no single solution for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So what was the biggest deciding factor for getting out of that and then getting into the data side of it?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely the one thing was like we were just dealing with dozens of data vendors, and my job over the years, I became almost like sometimes I became a data broker, like, talk to all these data vendors, and every time someone joined the company, they'd be like, I'm sorry, I need a new data set, or they need to be added to an existing license. So my job was just talking to data vendors and exchanges like all the time. And it was really frustrating because it's like, I don't want that to be my job. I don't want to be a data broker. And I want my team to just get the data instantly and just get back to work. And so we created Data Bento because we're like, hey, this is be a great way to empower these direct data users and have the traders and researchers, directly go on the platform, get the data, get back to work, and then they don't have to deal with me. I don't have to, I log in once a month and just check out their data progress and see what data they're working on. I can, track their usage and stuff like that. And that's enough for me, but I don't want to be the one that's, constantly doing the phone calls and, stuff like that. So, so I think that was kind of, one of the reasons why we started it. But then on top of that, just seeing the macro environment during the pandemic and being like, hey, we want to, it's about time. I've spent my whole beginning of my career just doing HFT stuff, which is great. Definitely learned a lot, but feel like I could learn a lot more by maybe building a product and actually shipping it out, and having other users be able to use a product would be really cool experience to have too. So decided why not go ahead and do that as well. Yeah.
Okay, that makes complete sense. So as a final question here, what advice would you give, trying to think of the age range here, someone who's graduating either college or graduate school, they're trying to figure out what path to go down. You've obviously done a variety of different kind of career paths within here. How would you go about this if you had to, I guess, redo it again? And what advice would you give someone in that position?
Yeah, I'd just say there's no single career path that's perfect for everyone out there. Look, you could be a full-time parent and be perfectly, happy, and that's great, right? Or you could, travel the world and be a consultant and just do contract work, and there's totally nothing wrong. Or do you have a 9 to 5? Have a normal 9 to 5. I don't know why people are ashamed of having a normal 9 to 5 job at, I don't know, any company. It doesn't need to be a brand name either, but that's totally fine, right? And I think that's something that when you're a student, you feel so much pressure because everyone's so accomplished around you. And definitely for me, I wish I hadn't fallen for that pressure as much when I was younger. But then also I'm trying to think of in my career, everything kind of fell into place by accident a little bit. So, just that it's okay to put yourself out there and to explore different paths. And, you can take a path and chances are you'll realize it's not the right one for you. And you'll find yourself wanting to pivot and quit as, faster than you expected. That happens to everybody. You're not alone. But yeah, definitely recommend just keep going. It's normal to explore, and maybe you realize that this path isn't the right one, and want to do something else, and yeah, it might not make any sense to society. But definitely for me, when I quit the HFT firm, and started this data company, I got a lot of criticism online, and from people being like, what was wrong with her? She must have had a really massive failure to want to do this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, kind of true. But then again, it's like, I'm okay with that. And, I really want to take this path, and I'm proud of taking a path that's kind of unusual this entire time, doing something kind of weird. But again, yeah, I think just important to live the life that, you want to live, not the life that people around you expect of you. And if you did that, right, I would have gone crazy by now. I feel like if I had just kind of did the things that people initially expected of me to do, I don't think I'd be nearly as happy. So yeah, just, try your best to listen to kind of, go out there, get your foot in the door. Of course, I didn't know that's so hard for me. My goal, I remember, still was get my foot in the door. Once you get your foot in the door, then you'll have more options, and, you'll be able to, figure out from there, what's the best path moving forward. But yeah, it's a constant journey and process.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for coming on. It was great having you.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.